All right, Henry Jackman, composer of Big Hero 6, thank you for joining us in your lovely studio.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, thank you. So I was really struck when I was listening to the score of how many different elements are at play, how many different tones you have to juggle in it. How do you do that while making it still a cohesive whole, if that makes any sense?
You're right. Well, it's a challenge, and also what's great about the film that one of the reasons you get to do a number of different things isn't just because you feel like it. It's because it's in the film. Meaning, Big Hero is particularly exciting because it's a superhero film, which is great, especially from a film composer point of view. Superhero film means you can do a big heroic theme, and you've got an important villain, you've got a big adversary. But then at the same time, it's a Disney animated film with an intimate, emotional story. Plus, the group are sort of tech geeks, so you've got like an electronic element. Plus, it's set in sort of San Francisco, so you've got this interesting geographical mixture of sort of Japan and America. And you're right, that could be a recipe for something sounding like it's schizophrenic musically and all over the place. And one of the reasons one of the ways you tie everything together is if you've got electronic elements, an emotional story, a big villain theme, a heroic theme, all the rest of it. One of the ways you tie that together is that irregardless of color and what your musical palette is, a theme is a theme. So if you have a strong Big Hero 6 melody, that can show up on horns, on strings, it can have an electronic version. So as long as you have coherent melodies are sort of universal regardless of what you play them on. Hopefully if they're survive the treatment. So one of the tricks to something like that is making sure you have, in the same way that the narrative of the actual film holds together despite having all these different environments, some are emotional, some are heroic. As long as you have strong themes, it will feel like it's cut from the same block.
Right, and so then how long did it take you? You don't have to give me an approximate number of days.
22 days, 7 hours, and no. Well, the interesting thing about animated films is they take ages. I mean, I'm the lucky one. If you're on an animated film right from its inception, it's a 3.5, 4 year process. So doing the music, we're the lucky ones. What tends to happen, I like to spend sort of 3 or 4 months on a score, so you really come in the sort of final part of the process. So I probably spent about 3 or 4 months on it. Now the thing is, because it's such a long process, you actually get to see some version of the film. Well, and I think I saw a version of this film about 6 or 7 months before I started working on it, because they're previews, and they're working on it. So you'll get to see a version. It'll have storyboards in it. Not all the animation's finished, the coloring isn't there, and all the rest of it. But from the perspective of a film composer, that doesn't really matter, because the first time you see it, you're trying to break the film down to understand what's the tone, what are the story arcs, what are the character arcs, and you're really just trying to write the initial themes for the characters. So it really doesn't matter that there's some storyboards and some unfinished lighting and whatnot. The animators get very proud about all that, and they don't want to show anything until it's finished. But it's vital that you just get a handle on the story early on, because then you're just sort of generally processing. And I just went to the piano, to be honest. After seeing the preview, I just spent a while on the piano. Just in fact, I can give you a quick. I don't know if you'll hear it.
Yes, please do.
etc. Now, I spent a while just at home, knowing that this was the sort of superhero movie that you're not going to get through with a lot of pulses in production, way before figuring out the palette and all the cool sounds and everything. I wanted the first music meeting with the directors to be like, hey, forget all that. I'm just going to play you, like the good old days. I'm going to play you music on a piano, because if you feel like I can write this theme that can work for the film, and you hear it as a melody on a piano and it sounds aspirational and heroic and whatnot, then it's a bonus. Then we can translate it into orchestration and all the rest of it. So I just spent a while at home really and just banned myself from any this whole room you see with all the computers and all the rest of it. I was just at home on a piano for ages, just on manuscript paper, and so it was like, okay, we definitely have these tunes as actual music way before we start throwing all the, because you can deceive yourself with technology and orchestration and whatnot. You can make something sound like it nearly is music when actually underneath there isn't really anything there,
Right,
so it's
right.
really good discipline to get going on, to make sure, almost think of it like a song. If someone's a songwriter, way before you turn it into a record with all the cool production, it should work with a guy strumming an acoustic guitar and someone else singing to figure out, is this a decent song or not,
Right. And at what point did that electric guitar come in? Because that was one of the most interesting elements of the score for me.
Yeah, well, it was clear to me that the first act of the film is more fun, more poppy. They're all kids, they're all into their sort of gadgets and iPhones and whatnot, and it wouldn't be appropriate to have a sort of somber, completely orchestral score. Whereas by the end of the film, when all sorts of dramatic stakes have been raised, the orchestra gets more and more prominent and more virtuosic. So just the nature of the film was asking for that. So funnily enough, I actually wrote a lot of the stuff at the front of the film towards the end. I kind of dived in the middle of the film as the superhero element is coming together, so I could get that theme going, and then came to the front of the film towards the end, and that's when I had the most fun with, the band element, the guitar elements, the electronic elements, because they're just a bunch of aspirational kids really trying to get their technology together. So having those colors and the vocabulary was really appropriate. And as the stakes rise and they become bigger than themselves, then the orchestra starts to rise, and you can get some, you get almost Superman like orchestration for later on.
Right. Now, if I'm correct, I think this is your third film that you've done for Disney.
That's right. Yeah, Winnie the Pooh, Wreck-It Ralph, and Big Hero 6.
Right, and of course now you're a part of a long line of great composers who have written music for Disney films. Do you feel any of that lineage when you're doing this? Of sort of does that even enter into your mindset?
It does. I'd probably take the word "great" out of when you think that Disney. I mean, you think of Fantasia. That's like concert music, and no, you're definitely aware of the privilege. Maybe not so much on Big Hero 6, not the privilege part of it, the history part of it. Winnie the Pooh was definitely a case of being incredibly mindful of a whole style and historical lineage, because it wasn't appropriate to try and turn Winnie the Pooh into a sort of Dark Knight version of Winnie. It was definitely to do with preserving something that we all know and we all love and we all cherish, and so that was very much a case of not exactly being in a musical museum, but being aware of the sort of family portraits on the wall kind of thing.
Yeah.
Big Hero 6 was interesting because whilst it is a Disney animation film, it's got the Marvel element. You know what I mean? It's because the story is a sort of Marvel comic. So in a funny way, it was a slight departure. It's not really in the same family as, say, Frozen. Because of this superhero element, and I guess Incredibles, that was Pixar. There's been some history of superhero films, but I think the tone of the film and how it looks was a little bit of a departure for them. So I don't think there was I couldn't think there wasn't such a lineage within famous and historical Disney films to be worried about. Wreck-It Ralph, there was a little bit. Wreck-It Ralph was an interesting combo because it had a lot of 8-bit stuff and some poppy stuff. But on the other hand, the King Candy character and Vanellope, there was a bit of music in the King Candy tune in Wreck-It Ralph, which went. Sorry, try and get the right notes. know, that sort of
Hmm.
type of melody definitely has, you can hear some sort of Disney history in the harmony and the melody. So I would argue there was probably more in Wreck-It Ralph and Winnie the Pooh. Big Hero 6 had, I guess, had a slightly more modern style, but then the heroic aspect of it, I always just try and aspire to the, when as a composer you are allowed to do big thematic material and it's not a minimalist or deconstructed type of musical score. I always think back to just how all the hairs go up on the back of your neck when you hear, you know, in the Richard Donner early Superman, the John Williams score, all those great themes. You know, I'm certainly not saying mine's as good, but you know, you try to think of bam ba 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 bam bam bam
Yeah.
bam bam da 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 bam ba da, you know. And it's not often you get to do that. And what was great about Big Hero 6 is it was a superhero film, and because it was animated, I was sort of given permission, as it were, to hark back to some of those proud, unabashed, you know, heroic thematic statements that wouldn't be so appropriate in something like, I don't know, The Dark Knight Rises. You wouldn't want to,
Yeah.
couldn't really do that sort of approach without, you know, ruining the film. So yeah, there was, in a funny way, the heroic parts of Big Hero 6 come from a lineage that goes through sort of Indiana Jones and you know, early Superman films and that kind of thing, you know, big heroic statements.
Right. And I'm always interested in how you, as a composer, tell the story of the movie without necessarily telegraphing to the audience this is how you should feel in a very kind of ham-fisted way.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
It's not quite such a tricky issue in animated films in general. Meaning, if you were working on a film like, oh, I don't know, Syriana or Michael Clayton or Argo or something,
Right.
because the nature of the drama and because of the nature of the psychological credibility and the realism, you can't have inflated statements of heroism or villainy, because in real life you don't get villains like Darth Vader or, in this film, Yokai, and you don't get a team of 6 people flying through the sky rescuing the situation. And in those kind of films, neutrality, objectivity, minimalism, being understated, not expressing not expressing overtly the psychology of the music, so you feel a heroic surge and all the rest of it. Funnily enough, in animated films, and I don't really know why this is the case, I guess it's because the nature of the story isn't realistic in the sense that a drama with, you know, regular character actors is realistic. Then you know, you are allowed to do it. In fact, if you don't do that, you failed as a film composer. If you have a team of people flying through the sky and the you know, the animation is super heroic, that's your invitation. You know, get stuck in. Now, having said that, you're right. You can't. So it's less that when these things are required, you're not allowed to go there. In Big Hero 6, if it's emotionally traumatic, I mean, you look at the end of the film when they're in space and there's the parting at the end. It's a profoundly emotional scene. So it's not that you can't be committed to the psychology of the music, but what is important is that you do it at the right time.
Right.
It's to do with when you mustn't lead. It's a very dislocating experience for an audience, even if they're not focused on why something isn't right. But even an audience who are not expert in music, if the music is already having such a strong descriptive element, but you haven't yet understood as a viewer why you're supposed to feel that, in other words, the music's ahead of the film, it's a dislocating experience, and you just feel like, on the one hand, I'm having these feelings, but I don't yet understand why I'm supposed to feel like that, and that's something you have to avoid at all costs.
Right.
That's part of the spotting, you know. It's to do with, you know, you have to watch the movie and talk to the directors and really figure out the timing of not I don't mean specifically exactly what the timing within the music, but like almost like a literary criticism discussion about when the audience are allowed to feel this, and when is the real point where such and such a feeling should be highlighted, and, you know, when does the tension really start cranking, or when should we keep the music out for a bit, and what's the point where we should come in and start really cranking the tension, when should this action be, you know. are all discussions, and the timing, specifically in animated music, because the rate of change of story and the rate at which events take place in an animated film is always more compressed than a live action film. So you could have a scene, you could have an action scene where, I don't know, our heroes are trying to overcome the adversary, but they're getting defeated, and then they get the upper hand, and then they don't get the upper hand, and all these things have to be marked. And at a closer, those things happen more rapidly. So the timing of when the music's supposed to turn it's critical in any kind of score, but particularly in animation.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and for performing for us. Our very first musical performance on.
I think I hit some of the right notes. I always forget my own tunes.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on the movie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.